Hi, everybody, and welcome to Upwave's Q4 2024 Masters of Brand Measurement event. We've got a really good panel today. We're going to be talking about the impact of attention on outcomes. Attention continues to be one of the most talked about topics in the industry. Marketers are excited about attention measurement, the leap forward it takes from viewability alone, but they still want to understand where attention measurement fits into the overall measurement framework, right? So in this installment, we're bringing a great panel together of industry experts. We're going to have a lively discussion. And we'll dive into the call to talk about standardization, where attention is positioned in modern advertising measurement, and its impact on outcomes. So I'm John Stewart, your moderator, EVP of Customer Success and Analytics at Upwave, and we've got a great panel for you. We've got Arif Cooley, VP of Brand and Agency Sales at Yelp, Tristan Webster, Chief Product Officer at TVision, and Daniel Slotweiner, SVP of Attention at DoubleVerify. Welcome, panelists. And I want to get us warmed up with our first question, which is a bit broad. And there is a pun in our question. Attention metrics seem to be getting a lot of attention in the space this year, but as a whole, kind of feels like it's still in its early stages. So Daniel, why don't we start with you? Kind of the first question here is what do you think has kind of created this upward trajectory within the industry?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Upwave. Thank you, John, for having this forum. It's always great to have a place to talk about the stuff I think about all the time, every day. And thinking about your question, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of giving credit to those that came before us. I'm thinking really of like Karen Nelson Field and Mike Follett and Mark Guidman and Jan, these are companies that have been sort of in the attention space for, going on 5, 6, 7 years. And they've really spent a lot of time, I think, making people aware of the fact that, if you have a model of advertising and advertising effectiveness that doesn't include some idea about attention and the ability to grab attention of consumers, then, you're probably missing a piece of the puzzle. So I give a lot of credit to them for kind of getting the industry focused on this. I think that's only part of the reason why it's starting to gain traction. I think you mentioned in the beginning, it's sort of there's an evolution of metrics that needs to happen to kind of deal with the complexity of today's particularly digital landscape. So you see things like viewability, in some cases falling short of kind of meeting the marketer's needs, particularly around like cross-platform comparability and creative optimization and things like that. So there's sort of a need coming together with an understanding that this is kind of a critical piece that we need to figure out. And of course, technology plays a role. We can do things now today that we couldn't do 10 years ago to make this a reality. So I think that, it's a combination of factors really kind of motivating the industry's focus on attention. But as you said, it's still early days, a lot to prove.
Yeah, and kind of on the theme of sort of the evolving technology and being able to do things that we didn't used to be able to do. Tristan, I kind of wanted to ask you about how you see the space evolving.
Yeah, it's evolution is a good word for it. So I joined TVision about 8 years ago. And the company was really young, but was doing something that I hadn't seen anywhere else, which is measuring attention in real time, passively in the living room. So like something about understanding where and when people pay attention used to be something you could only do in a lab. You needed highly specialized technology. You needed, high level of, focus and engagement. It's very expensive. But with advances in measurement technology, we're now in a place where we've got companies, like TVision. We're able to measure in the living room within our panel at scale, 5,000 homes whether or not people are paying attention to the TV screen across linear and CTV. And then you've got other companies like the Lumens of the world that are doing similar things, but for personal devices. So once you start to be able to have ongoing tracking and measurement, that does open up the possibility of it being more than just a creative pre-testing exercise. It becomes something that you can do across the extent of the campaign. And so, you know, I really think it's been big technology evolution that has kind of paired with the shift that's happening on the demand side.
Excellent. And Arif, I think we've gotten two perspectives so far on the growth potential and how things are evolving.
Yeah.
Wanted to get your perspective on maybe what are some of the obstacles that would prevent wider adoption.
Well, firstly, thank you, Upwave and John, for having me. Appreciate that. And hello to my esteemed panelists. Appreciate that. Good to be able to be on a panel with you both. Very talented lads. So I'm going to come from a publisher perspective. I do have experience in ad tech and publishing, but I felt like, you know, the best way I could sort of give my thoughts is around, as a publisher, you know, our goal is obviously user experience, maximize revenue, right? Very simple in theory. But I think I got to zoom out a little bit to your question, if that's okay, John, because I mean, you know, it's been a tough year, right? It's a crazy year, right? We've got a lot of like, you know, macroeconomic issues going on. It's a political year, right? We've got something like 12 billion being spent in the past 30 days just on, I saw this stat, it's insane, just on political ads alone. So there's a lot going on. And what we're sensing is, you know, in such a sort of a tough market, let's say, you know, when you look at our clients and when we work with them, it's all about, you know, business outcomes, right? That's number one priority. Like, how do we, you know, drive revenue? How do we generate business? So when I think about the complexity, and then I think about what's happening right now in terms of, you know, the obstacles, you know, a lot of folks are just, you know, getting on, trying to drive their business, looking forward to January 1, right? And at the same time, there's a lot going on in measurements, right? You have, you know, we started this year with MMM. We started this year with the cookieless world, right? All of these things changing. Clients have had to change and pivot, right? And move on to, okay, what other things are going to measure the efficacy of my media? So I think what I think some of the obstacles are specifically that I found on our platform is awareness, you know, understanding it, understanding how that all comes together. How, you know, when a client activates with a agency, that kind of ricochets into a publisher, and what advantages we could take together to make this, you know, make the measurements more formidable and stronger, and to see a full outlay of that. So just general awareness is key, and understanding how to work with the third-party players as a publisher to see how that actually impacts the full story of the funnel, right? That's another big sort of challenge. And the fact, I mean, the ongoing fact, and Daniel was right, like it's 5-6 years old in ad tech is, I think that's like, I don't know, how many years is that? 50, right? It's a long time, right? You mentioned, I was like, wow, that's a long time. But, you know, we've seen eye tracking technology in the past, right? We've done it for back in the day with grocery stores, with, you know, looking at like products on stores, to how that's evolved. But I think the biggest challenge right now is just the standards, right? There's no real standard that says, hey, you know, this is how this works, you know, and how it all comes together. So, you know, a handful of things. I mean, obviously the macroeconomic issues where people and clients are trying to drive revenue, business leads, you know, and really make an impact on their business, and just trying to navigate through the awareness and standards of this type of category.
So it sounds like you're saying that because there has been a call for standardization of attention, it's been pretty widely published. I guess you're saying that you agree with that it is necessary to kind of make sense of the information.
So just ask the question again. It isn't necessary, or it is? So I didn't quite.
Yeah. Do you agree that it is necessary, standardization?
Yeah, great. Yes, absolutely, John. It's very necessary. I think to go deeper, right? There's a lot of, you're right, there's a lot of standard conversations going on, but to really fully understand that, you know, and I have a perspective on it. I mean, how reviewability came about, right? There's a distinct reason why that came, because we're trying to prevent fraud, right? And we're trying to make sure, you know, P&G were like, we're not paying a penny until we can see the ad, right? You know, and the whole market shifted. So there was a very actual, tangible piece, which is important as it is with attention. I think it's much more complicated with attention, right? You know, there's not intention fraud, right? There's not that on the headline as opposed to what we were seeing with viewability. So I think if I mirror to viewability and how fast that moved and how things changed, you know, attention is a big piece of this. I just don't know how that will evolve to the standards that it was, say, compared to like viewability, where it was a little bit more simpler.
Yeah, it does seem a bit more difficult because of, you know, the various approaches to attention measurement. So I think the next obvious question would be, well, how do we think this can be achieved? So, Tristan, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so there's a lot that's going on at a industry level around trying to tackle this issue. So the IAB has an attention task force. The ARF is in, I think, phase 3 of their attention study. And you know what they're trying to do is codify the different categories of what might constitute attention. They're trying to collect information from the different measurement partners to understand, you know, what are the signals that we get in these different methodologies and how are they similar and different. But you know, this is everything from can I hear the ad? Can I see the ad? Do I think about the ad? Do I have an emotional response to the ad? Like that, there's so many different layers that are trying to be explored, and I think they all tell you very different things. Not to mention the fact that when you look across different types of media, the objectives of what you're trying to achieve in these different environments are completely different from one another. Whether or not you see value in you know, 0.2 second micro exposure in a social feed versus sitting through 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds of a full screen CTV ad, like these all require different approaches. So I don't know if full standardization across the entire advertising stack is necessarily the right objective for the industry. But certainly within like groups of media, being able to have some level of alignment of how we look at social, how we look at, you know, big screen, large format video, how we look at small format video, you know, I think we start to get to something that could approach some kind of standardization, but I think there's going to have to be some trade-offs there for sure.
Yeah, I think when we start to think about, you know, trade-offs and maybe the different approaches that exist, you start to wonder, is there a certain methodology that is needed? Like, is there a specific methodology that needs to be agreed upon to really start to think about attention measurement as, you know, one of the key pieces of measurement? Daniel, any thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. And sorry if there's background noise. Just started, of course, Murphy's Law. But you know, I think it's really important, and I think Arif alluded to this, right? That to think about why we're doing attention measurement, right? We're trying to solve problems for advertisers, and advertisers care about outcomes, right? And so, you know, we can't lose focus on that when we think about, you know, standardization and whether or not you need a certain type of methodology. All the advertisers I know could care less what goes into a metric. That's like they want to know what goes in, they want full transparency, but they're, you know, pretty agnostic about what data sources are used as long as it's going to drive outcomes. And so I think it's really important that we continue to be transparent and to try all the data sources that exist. So for instance, our product is built primarily on data we collect through our tag, but we also incorporate eye tracking data through our partnership with TVision, and we're exploring other aspects of that. And we are looking at all types of data. Why? Because we want to create a metric that is predictive of outcomes, right? What, you know, if you're trying to drive upper funnel outcomes, what's the best way to do that is the question that we're trying to help advertisers answer, not what's the best way to measure attention, which is an important question, but I think more academic and definitely much more focused on, psychological concepts about kind of internalizing ideas, which is a different project than we're engaged in, is how I think about it.
You mentioned outcomes, and I think in the early days, it has been said, or some people have said, that attention is in and of itself an outcome. Obviously at Upwave, we measure brand outcomes, and so we believe attention works best in tandem with an outcome. What's your perspective on this? Where do you see attention kind of in the entire measurement framework?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very strongly, like, we don't believe attention for attention's sake is the goal here, right? Again, just to put a fine point on it, it's a means to an end. We want to use it to help advertiser diagnose, what's working in a campaign, what's the best creative, what's the right place to put that. We want them to be able to use it as a predictor of what's going to happen when they make certain decisions on the buying side. And so I'd say I'm kind of full agreement with Upwave here on, attention is not an outcome that you'd want to necessarily maximize. But it is something that can and should be used to understand how to achieve the outcomes you care about. And therefore, like, when we think about attention, we're looking at, what are the ways to apply that differently in different contexts, right? What does a direct response advertiser need versus a brand advertiser from an attention product? And so again, like, the focus on what is a marketer trying to do, what are the things that, attention products can do, or attention metrics can do to help them achieve that, is really the sort of lens through which we think about everything.
Yeah. So I guess from the other side of things, Arif,
Yeah.
how have you worked in partnership with, folks like Double Verify or T-Vision, in partnership with outcomes measurement providers? I feel like it might all come together with you, or how you are getting asked for this type of measurement. So what's been your experience?
I love your question. If I might, I just want to, I also really enjoyed what Daniel was saying, and also Trishan. There were two pieces, if that's okay, that I'll hopefully bring forward to answer your question. But I felt like attention for attention's sake is a really big headline from our perspective, right? Because we can spend a lot of time, we got the attention, but what's the business outcome? And then I was listening to, it's what Trishan said, there's all these variables of herring, eye tracking, mouse, all these maneuvers to get measurement. So our business at Yelp, and I'm in no way trying to pitch Yelp, this is just what we do. We are all about deterministic data, right? Versus probabilistic. So these are proper signals with high intent. So we know there's attention and intention, right? So the intention then will lead to, kind of what Daniel's saying, the business outcome, right? We will take, follow that through. So I think if I'm, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm answering your, like, addressing your question, John, like, I feel that there's, there are, what we're seeing is, last year we weren't doing so much, I'll be honest, from an attention perspective, measurement side. The biggest challenge was we would hear at the end point, oh, there was an attention measurement or an AU from Adelaide, and they were using this. We're like, oh, right, that's interesting. What does that mean? And how do we actually optimize on this, right? Like, how do I actually say, if someone is, they're measuring a business outcome, but they're measuring attention, and they're looking at our intention type media, how do we optimize that to basically give them the best outcome based on the attention scores? So a lot of this was happening in the past, where it was very much kind of we'd get bits, like we wouldn't get the full story. We'd get like, oh, here's a report that happened in the quarter or end of quarter or mid-quarter, right, within a campaign flight, which isn't very strong for even helping the category, right, to understand that with the client. So Forward Wine, now we're working with the Trade Desk, we're working with Adelaide, companies like that basically, Adelaide's really, really advanced on this, and they have, they've set it up so that our campaigns can be done in real time, right? So the attention measurement can be seen in real time by the campaign. We can optimize in real time. You have the Trade Desk have their algos, obviously, that drive that as well. So we're seeing, more of that type of engagement which is helping us understand, and again, our end is more about deterministic data, right? So intentional data with attention, right? And what happens to that becomes a very interesting story. And I just don't, we haven't seen the full story yet. I can't, it's very directional right now. So, but I'm hoping to see, like, how do we break all of that down from sort of the beginning to the end? And how does these attention matrix and optimization help, give us the right guidance to help the clients maximize their inventory, maximize their media spend, their creative, right? To hit our platform to drive their outcomes. It's a very long-winded answer, John, but I'm hoping the thread kind of like all of those components. I mean, I think those are the things that we're seeing, and it's more, having the real-time data, right? I think the Adelaide just did a deal a while back with the Trade Desk. You can buy the segments now, and you can actually do high and low, medium attention buying, right? Which I think is a great advancement, right? We're managed as a business, but we're able to help that story as well. So, yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it. Does that sort of answer that? What you're asking, John, just to make sure I didn't go too off on a rant.
Yeah. And, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we always think about the marketer's outcome objective. So what's your outcome? What's your objective? How do you want to maximize that objective? What optimizations do you have at your disposal? What can you do? What levers do you have? And how does attention move the needle? And so that's exactly how we would think about it. And I have failed to mention as moderator that there is a Q&A button. And so there will be a Q&A at the very end of the panel discussion. But in the meantime, we're happy to take questions live. And I think this is we did get a question, so this is a reminder for me, which I think fits in really well to this topic, while going back a topic to kind of standardization. So the question is, if, let's say you're an attention company that uses biometric data to define attention, and then you have other companies that have created more, I guess, media quality metrics. So they'd be behavioral type metrics that could be understood at the impression level, that do not use eye tracking, facial coding, et cetera, but are saying that their attention. I think this is probably a little bit more for you, Tristan, but like, how would you respond to that? Like, sort of attention being defined in these two very different ways.
So I would hope that those companies are at least taking behavioral data as ingredients at some point in their development process. However you define attention, as I said earlier, it's like whether it's cognitive, physical actions, all these kind of things, there's a human behavioral aspect to the concept of attention that I don't think you can escape. And I think it's difficult to derive that from signals alone. I'll take, well, we talked about viewability earlier, right? So viewability, hugely important, transformative to the digital advertising landscape. So CTV comes along, a lot of money moves across into CTV. And the logical answer is, all right, let's measure it with viewability. And the average viewability of a CTV ad, which is non-skippable, which is always played full screen, is close to 100%. So the traditional measure that we have, the digital signal that we get, doesn't really tell us anything anymore. And so to the extent that you can do a good job of like tying together the digital signals with human behavior, I think that's the ideal, because it scales better. It gives you a really nice sort of scalable solution. But without the evidence from the other side, which is there a person in the room? Is that person looking at their phone or looking at the screen? I think you're making guesses by like leaping to the end result, which is the outcome. And to go back to the question that you were just on before around like where does it fit into the measurement framework, is it's like, yes, you want the outcome, the brand lift, you want the change in favorability, you want the increase in sales. Like these are the things that the advertiser wants. But understanding how you got there, you need earlier signals. And I think the kind of leading indicators you can get from attention measurement end up being a bit more actionable, and probably tie into something that you can drive like very specific, tangible changes to your media strategies.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Daniel, you sort of mentioned that you've incorporated both types of measurement in the past. Any reaction or response to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess, first of all, I don't know many companies that aren't currently using at least some biometric, including us. IAS has a partnership with Lumen, so I assume they're using eye tracking data too. So I think the industry is recognizing there's value in that data for sure. But again, I come back to sort of, what is the criteria that you want to assess attention metrics on? Like, what do they have to do to be useful, to meet some future standard of some future definition, right? And I would always want that to be in terms of outcomes. I mean, people keep referring to viewability as the sort of paradigm here. There was a lot of discussion in the industry about, where to set the thresholds for viewability, and that was based on research around effectiveness. The research shows, that there was, we had to come up with some number. It wasn't that there was zero value below that number, and we shouldn't forget that lots of impressions are transacted on today that don't meet that threshold. But again, the decision criteria was not how are we going to measure it. Granted, much simpler problem. It was, where is the effectiveness level? What is the minimum that an advertiser should be paying for? And again, I think that's kind of if you frame it that way, then there might be many ways to get to a metric that meets that standard. And that could be methodological differences or data source differences. And so I don't expect us to be able to, come up with a list of things, ingredients that must be in this recipe. Seems like probably not where we're going to end up.
Interesting. What I'm hearing from all of you is that there's some level of standardization, but at the same time, what really matters is the outcome, right? And so the extent to which you can use attention to achieve the outcome you want is really the end goal, which would be sort of suggests that maybe standardization isn't necessarily the key. And so that I think is a good segue into pivoting into the next kind of section here that of the discussion, which is let's kind of talk a little bit more about the value that the attention metric is going to bring to marketers. So I guess I'm always a little bit first curious about the experience of the user. So Arif, how do you think the impact of attention varies across different stages of the marketing funnel you've seen?
Most of this is direction, right? To be honest, I feel like we haven't had a full sort of flow in this, and that's a question I was going to ask Daniel, like when he was talking about just the whole sort of flow, beginning and end, whether he has measurements on that from a business outcome perspective. So we haven't really seen much, but what I feel like, what I'd love to see, because I'm going to answer it that way, is a thread that tells me high attention drove this type of action, which means this creative is killer. Therefore, the next sequential should be this flow at mid funnel and this to the close, right? So almost like a storyboard that shows that. I feel like the attention is a key component to that, right? That's really going to help guide that. But I think we're still early in our stages right now to really be able to say, yeah, this is it. This is what we've seen. And we're still testing, you know, a lot of the top funnel component part without seeing the output of a business outcome. So those are my challenges, to be honest with you. It's a real challenge for us because, you know, again, I think we're in the moment, right? As a publisher, right? We're trying to, you know, we're moving fast, right? We're trying to get ahead of it. There's other variables like conversion APIs where people seeing transaction data. So you put all your resources towards those elements internally to build like a transaction solution of a business outcome. So I feel like if we could see, you know, if there's a study or, you know, a case where we can build that out and show that flow, I think that would only help drive the category even further. So it's very directional right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I could jump in, first of all, completely agree, Arif. Like, you know, we need a ton more research here. And I think there's a bunch I want to say on this topic. I guess, first of all, like we tend to proceed as an industry on a kind of case study basis, which is a tough paradigm. It takes a long time, and the results of any one case study could be attributable to many functions. So, you know, one of the things we're working on is you know, how do we do a much better job tying attention metrics to outcome data at scale? We have a partnership with a panel company called Attain where we're doing this. We're working with Upwave and others, right, to move away from a case study paradigm to something that's more cross campaign, cross publisher, always on, so that we can start to understand, you know, at a macro level, you know, when and where these metrics are impactful. Also, in the case of our product, we do have an overall attention index, but you know, we focus on sort of these, you know, kind of more specific measures of attention, things about the ad presentation or about user interactions. And when you do that, then you start to understand that, okay, there's a more subtle story here. You know, certain types of signals are going to tell you more about lower funnel actions versus upper funnel ones. And again, to the extent you're trying to build something that has levers that will help an advertiser know which ones to pull, you know, you want something that has a little more complexity to it than a single number. And so, you know, it's a long-winded way of saying, like, you know, the path from, you know, a stimulus to a marketing outcome is a long one, and it's not a straight one always, right? So what we're hoping is, you know, over time, people start to use attention metrics in a systematic way throughout their planning and buying process, and that helps them incrementally improve their outcomes, right? You know, it's never a good situation when you're in a bake-off. It's like, okay, you know, we're going to try these 3 attention metrics and we're going to pick one at the end of the day based on, you know, how this one campaign, which could be for a product that nobody wants, performs, as an example, right? So I think, you know, we like to think about this as sort of a journey that's going to take quite a long time. And to be clear, we're focused on improving the metrics over time. So even sitting here, you know, our product kind of has evolved a ton in the last 6 months in terms of how we're constructing indices, which channels we cover, what data is going into them. So it's not a static situation, which also makes the research, you know, kind of something that necessarily has to be continuous and ongoing. And it doesn't work without partnership across publishers, measurement companies like ours, and advertisers.
We should talk.
We are
Please.
talking, aren't
I'm
we?
curious, how does
Just
that?
you and me here.
Yes, you and I, yeah. Just I'm curious, like I'm interested even like media consumption has changed for. I mean, an old dude in media, right? Like it's changed a lot, right? You know, from television to TV and streaming and so forth. But now with obviously, you know, the things like TikToks and platforms like that, where attention is driven by algos, right? For individual attention versus, you know, what I'm looking at is very different to, you know, my peers, my friends, my wife. Like it's very different. My wife has her personalized algo, right? You know, I did a little experiment with myself and went through the TikToks thing for a month to see what happened and tried tricking the algo. But it's pretty precise, right? So how does that play into that from your when you see that sort of zoom out of like attention matrix for such individual precise, you know, consumption?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great question. I guess like, and this may not end up working out, to be clear, but our position is like, and our product is based on this concept of, we are measuring always on, so billions of impressions a day, and we're establishing benchmarks by channel, by placement, and then what we're offering the advertiser a relative score against those benchmarks. So what we're trying to help advertisers do is make the most of the channels and placements that they choose to buy. In some cases, we want to help them select which ones are best given a certain outcome. But for now, it's like, okay, you're already buying inside TikTok. Here's a baseline. Here's how you performed. Here's how it compares to others in your vertical. Here's how it compares to, maybe to competitors, right? So, we're in the business of trying to give a sort of real-time feedback that an advertiser can use to improve incrementally. And over time, we believe that'll lead to better outcomes. You have to factor in things like price, of course, right, which is usually the biggest factor in determining, whether something's going to actually be ROI positive. And so working to kind of combine attention metrics with cost metrics is a big part of making this a reality. And so we think about it that way, not, kind of, can I predict, what attention Arif is going to get in TikTok tomorrow, which would be nice, but I think it's impossible. Rather, we can say something like, the average attention levels on TikTok yesterday were X, and tomorrow we think they're going to be Y. And then after you run your campaign, here's what we actually saw.
Right. Super helpful. Thank you, Daniel.
I love
Yeah,
the idea, of we live in a case study paradigm, the industry, because I do see that all the time, right? If a new metric or something evolves, everyone wants to see the case study that proves that it's real or right. And in some ways that's needed and necessary, right? But in other ways, it's laughable to think that there is one formula for every brand out there, and every media plan. And but speaking of that, we did get an interesting question from one of the attendees that references an Ad Age article recently came out that Kroger, in conjunction with the ARF, did a study and did not find a consistent relationship between attention and outcomes. Have you all read this? Are you aware of this? And I'm curious if there's any reaction here.
Oh, yes. I believe we were called out in particular here. So I can obviously do not want to speak to the specifics. Kroger's our client. We've worked with them closely. I think there's a couple things. One is it reads as if the ARF and Kroger did a study together, which is not the case. They're sort of two separate studies. We didn't participate in the ARF one, although we're going to participate in the second one, just because our methodology is not conducive. I think they just took creatives and had people score them, which is not how our product works. But it's a perfect example of, like, I would expect in lots of cases for null findings, right? Good research should result in null findings, plenty of times. And so I think the headline that there wasn't a result is actually good learning. It would be nice to, dig in and understand, okay, what were the specifics? Why was it? What was actually measured? So I think that's where you get really good information. But as we said, like, case study paradigms are, limited in terms of kind of what you can generalize from them. And I think that's what you see here.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I get asked all the time to work with partners to try and like prove out this connection between attention and outcomes. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is you look at such a small horizon or such a small scope of the campaign, or you can only control for so much within these kind of studies, that I think you just miss so many of the underlying factors that determine whether or not it's feasible to kind of move the needle in the scope of that particular campaign. So depending on, you would see at Upwave, looking across many brands, it's like the base level brand metrics vary greatly from industry to industry, company to company, ad spend to ad spend. and the ease with which you'll get responses on different metrics are going to vary greatly as well. And so you really need like cross-sectional, robust research approach, I think, to get something that we can draw like really meaningful conclusions. Otherwise, we're just overreacting to, you know, a single piece of evidence. And I think as much as a vendor, if I saw the positive story, I'd be saying, hey, send it to Ad Age and tell everyone how important attentions are in driving outcomes. You know, I think, you know, it's equally alarmist to be able to kind of jump to the other side of the argument. So I think it's too soon.
I love what you're saying, Trishan. I think it's definitely, I'm just thinking from a client perspective, a brand perspective, right? They have so many things that they have to do from a brand. I mean, they're small teams, right? Making multi-million-dollar decisions. And they got to walk in, the CMO's got to walk in and talk to a CFO and say, is it working or not? Right. You know, and that's what's hard, right? It's like, and then the whole sort of, to be able to set aside and then do another test or look at the other variables that don't give a business outcome. I think that's really challenging for a CMO to continue their conversation with the CMO and say, I want more money, or it's working, right? So I think that's where, I don't know how we can sharpen our pencil on that, but that's where I think brands really need help, because they, you know, they're under a lot of pressure, you know, to produce outcomes, you know, and you know, every CMO I've talked to is like, yeah, it's really fun going in those CFO conversations, right? But it's reality that how can we help them, you know, better understand these you know, these up and coming categories that can help inform them.
Yeah, and thank you all, particularly you, Daniel, for answering that so directly, given you're probably closer to it than you wanted to be. But I think the point is such a good one, which is there's a headline, right? So if there was not really a finding or a direct correlation of something, the headline is going to say something, but then the nuance is what's important and what action you can take. And I think this, in a way, leads us to a discussion of, Tristan, you had mentioned earlier the ingredient. We're like, what are the ingredients, right? And you know, I think that that's a really important question, right? Because I guess, for example, what do you think may have the greater impact on capturing attention? Is it the content itself? Or is it the medium through which it is delivered?
Yeah, I know everyone would love to say, hey, I spent all this money on this amazing creative and everyone loved it. And I think that matters a lot. Like there's a reason people spend a fortune on their Super Bowl ads and try and make the most of the opportunity. They spend a lot of money on that creative because they're going to put it in a place that people are going to pay attention to and can then process. So what we tend to see is the best predictor of whether or not someone is going to pay attention is primarily driven by the medium. Think about the difference between someone running an ad at 3 o'clock in the morning on TV versus at 7 o'clock at night when everyone sits down and is watching TV together as a family. You could run the same piece of content, you can run the same ad, you can have very different outcomes in those two scenarios. So I generally talk about it like there's a level that will be set by the quality of the media that you run in, and then the quality of the ad will move you up and down a little bit either side, but it's not going to turn a very low attention opportunity into a high attention opportunity. I was talking with my team the other day, and someone was talking about this idea of like, is there an ad where you call your family in to come and watch it with you because this ad just came on? And unfortunately, like as much as we'd like to believe that our ads can have that impact, I don't think that is necessarily the case. So they both matter. I think medium is going to kind of set the stage, and then it's creative's job to make the most of the time that it has on that stage. And candidly, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why like publishers and advertisers haven't been able to fully align on doing deals centered around attention, because it's a lot of who he said, she said, who's responsible for whether or not attention is achieved. Is it the media or the creative? And so then they end up at loggerheads. It's just a blame game.
Yeah, I think we could, and I'm getting some great questions here in the chat, and we could probably go on for another 2 hours on each one of the ingredients and how much it matters. But I do have some interesting ones. First one is clicks or click-through rate optimization as both a lever for an outcome or for attention, or maybe used in an attention model. Curious as to what you all think about clicks in general for as it relates to this topic.
Can I answer real quick and get out of the way? Because I'll only speak to it from a TV perspective, but how many of you have clicked on an interactive ad on TV? I think for TV, which is largely like a lean back environment, it's hard to rely on those like digital signals. But Daniel and Arif probably have a much stronger perspective from the digital side.
I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the question is getting at. I mean, CTR as a measure is, has well-known pluses and minuses. A lot of the minuses have to do with the quality of the click and the intention behind the click, and does it lead to a meaningful conversion or high value customer, right? Those are things you obviously cannot in most cases tell from the initial click. Should it be an ingredient in attention measures? Well, it is in ours. We incorporate engagement with the ad, with content around the ad, with the device, as a meaningful signal of attention, right? If you're clicking on something, you've at least made a decision. You may not have processed the information in the ad, but you've seen it and decided something about it. So, so I think it should be one of many signals that you use. Optimizing the CTR can be one of the best and only options in a lot of environments. So, sometimes advertisers have to rely on it. But again, I'm probably not addressing the question behind this question, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead, Arif.
No, I was just gonna just double down on what Daniel said. I mean, it's just another variable, right? It's an important variable.
Yeah.
Depending on the situation, I think if it's search versus display, it's very different sort of outcomes, right? The intentional buyers, unbranded versus branded. There's a lot of variables at stake. It's it's sort of the pixel within a big picture, right? It just helps people make informed decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think personally it goes back to medium, right? So there's certain environments where you're just not gonna have many clicks, and so it should not be used, like TV. There's other environments where it's probably more noise than signal, like mobile. Or touchscreen environments. Okay, one last question on this, because I feel like we've talked a little bit about, keeping with the ingredients theme, talked about a little bit about medium, a little bit about creative. What about targeting? And again, this is coming from the audience. So if the theory is I'm only going to pay attention to ads for products that I personally am in the market for or that appeal to me in some way, does the premiumness of the environment even matter, or what's the relationship there? Any perspectives on that?
How do you know what the ad is for until you've paid attention? I guess it's the first reaction.
Fair enough.
But I mean, I think the other obvious answer is yes. Like, I mean, the audience is going to be a factor in how much attention something gets. But again, like, I think there's actually, I read this question in the chat and it made me think of something we haven't talked about a lot, which is incrementality. It's like, okay, well, sometimes you're going, your lower funnel campaign is basically retargeting, or you're looking for high intent people to speed up a purchase. There may not be a lot of incrementality there. You may be hitting people with an ad who already, as the question implies, we're in the market regardless. And then there's other types of campaigns where you really are trying to generate demand in the first place, and you wouldn't expect to be targeting sort of high intent users, quite the opposite, in fact. And so, again, like, you know, I think about attention as something you can use to understand, if you know which paradigm you're in, you know, how well you're doing at that stated goal. So again, would love to be able to give sort of simple one-word answers to some of these questions, but the truth is, like, you know, marketers are trying to do many things at different times in different ways, and right, we have to give them tools to help make decisions in as many of those contexts as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. You know, how many times does the advertiser or media buyer even get feedback on if they're reaching the right audience for a campaign? And so the right tools for the right job, or for the job, is probably the best and most concise answer. So I
You said
just
it better.
got sorry, go ahead.
You said it better. Yes, there is a concise answer.
Oh, yeah, and I had the luxury of just hearing what you said and just repeating it. So we did just get the 10-minute warning, and those are all the questions we have. So what I want to do now is ask each of you a little bit about the future of attention. So I think, to sort of mix two hot topics right now, I want to start with AI and ask all of you, what role do you think AI and machine learning is going to play here in advancing attention metrics? So Daniel, do you wanna start?
Sure, happy to. So I guess the first way to take this is look at what AI is already doing in the space. So it's already playing a role significantly in optimization. You know, we are feeding our data into our AI-powered algorithmic bidding. I know Group M is doing similar things, and I'm sure many others are. So it's already being used to take, you know, what is, you could conceive of as sort of a massive training data set, in our case, billions of impressions measured for attention, and build predictions about outcomes. And so I think that's, you know, where things are already, and obviously that's going to evolve a lot. I think we're starting to see AI be a huge factor in generating creative, which is going to allow for, you know, customization of creative in a way that we've never seen before. And I think attention has the potential, not there yet, totally not proven, but the potential to be the right feedback signal for understanding whether your creative is going to resonate with an audience in a particular placement against a particular set of content. So you're starting to get into this like highly dimensional world that, you know, we can't comprehend ourselves, but you could imagine these systems being able to get a lot of value for advertisers out of. So again, like, I think about the existing attention providers as sort of building these truth training data sets that will be grist for the AI mill for a while.
Yeah. Arif, any reaction to that, or how do you see this playing
Yeah, I
out?
mean, just our platform, obviously, we do a lot on AI. We have millions of reviews, millions of photos, right? All that data. We make it more precise so we can drive attention, intention, right? So it's part of our DNA. We were doing it for 10 years. If you think about our business, you know, just making sure we have authentic content, you know, and making sure that it's not fraudulent. So it's a big part of our DNA and how we think about our business going forward and how we touch consumers. So when I think about, obviously, you know, the cliche that, you know, if you're not, you know, AI is not going to take the jobs that only the people that aren't using AI, right? I mean, we've heard that said right at the beginning of the year. It's true. You know, obviously, you know, I see this platform for attention where by just the speed of data, right, and being able to really, you know, define that attention is only going to get better, right? It's going to go at a speed faster than humans can do. So it's kind of like, it's table stakes for what we need to help enhance the category. So I'm excited to see that, and maybe they can start, you know, figure out how they detect sort of that intention fraud, right? Maybe that becomes out of it, but I think we're going to see more. And I'm not by no means an expert at this, but I feel like, yeah, it's game on. It's only going to help the category.
Yeah,
and adoption. So
agreed. Okay, well, for our last question, we're gonna go for the most broad and most future-looking we possibly can, which is, what do you think the industry can expect as attention evolves? So what can the industry expect? Tristan, any ideas on this one?
Yeah, so I'm gonna put my CTV hat on again, because I think that's where a lot of the advertising dollars are moving at the moment. And at this point, I think we've got a lot of the right building blocks. We can measure what's going on. We can understand the drivers of attention and the behaviors that we're seeing. Where we're breaking down is that some of the important levers that are needed to be able to transact and optimize around attention are not always available within the bid stream for people to actually adjust a meaningful chunk of their CTV spend. So I think what we're going to see is, like, as we understand the signals that are important, we'll see the other predictive signals start to come along for the ride. And that's when we'll start to see, like, the accelerator kind of hit the floor, because we'll be able to take all the things we're learning that matter through measurement and reporting, and we'll actually be able to put them to work to drive really tangible changes in behavior. So I think that's it. It's a marketplace where ultimately the right information is available for us to really change the way that people buy.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up our panel. Couldn't have said it better myself. So I want to thank all of you for attending, and a special thanks to Daniel, Tristan, and Arif for giving us these really great expert opinions. So reach out to any of us if you have questions that you didn't want to ask live, and stay tuned for the next Masters of Measurement. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, John.
thanks.